Hi, it's Mike Stevenson here. In this video today, we're going to talk about some of the Ignite announcements around functions. We're going to look at this from the perspective of the Azure Integration Services development. So I think the three that particularly are interesting for me are highlighted here. I think with this isolated worker improvements, I think there's a few sort of subsections Microsoft have raised within that that I think we'll have a little bit of a look at. And then here's the two articles that I'm looking at when I kind of dig a little bit deeper into some of these announcements. So starting first up, we've got this article by Eamon here. So thanks, Eamon, for writing this article. And if we have a little bit of a look through what Microsoft is saying here, so starting off with the .NET 8 announcement. So a lot of us will be using .NET 6 probably at the minute, maybe .NET 7 for functions. Some people might even have older functions as well, still on .NET Core 3.1, which you should be looking to migrate up to the newer version. So if you're looking at .NET 8, so there's a couple of things to note here. Firstly, we've got this upgrade assistant here, and you can see I think this is an example of it in Visual Studio there, so that'll help you do the migration. What I'm really hoping is in the past, when we've had to do these function upgrades, there's always been some changes that you had to do to your code, which is quite frustrating. Really, what I want to do is update the .NET version. I want to update the function runtime if necessary, and I want to change as little of my code as possible. Often, the last few times, there's been some signature changes that have been needed on some of your functions, which was quite frustrating. So hopefully that'll be a bit more seamless this time. But we should have some new opportunities coming from this upgrade. Now, I think one thing just to call out here. So .NET 8 does not currently support the in-process model. So if you were on .NET 6 functions and you had an in-process function, Microsoft were trying to push us towards the isolated worker model. And I think that if you go to .NET 8, you're going to have to migrate over to that isolated worker. So it's probably a good time to do that. I'm not sure if they've said anything about whether they might support in process. I think from the roadmaps I've seen in the past, I don't think that was on there last time I checked. But they've been pushing that way for a while, so it's probably worth biting the bullet and doing it if you haven't already. Now, the bit that I wanted to dig a little bit into was this isolated worker improvements in .NET. So there's a couple of really cool things here. So number one, I think this support for ASP integration. So in the past, I've seen when people build an API backend written in functions, it's a really easy model to do it. But I think sometimes I've come across scenarios where as the development team build more and more functions, a lot of the developers have had a preference to be able to use some of the ASP.NET functionality to help them build their API in this web API model. And I've seen sometimes people would migrate from a function app to hosting an app service web app just to leverage some of that web API ASP.NET functionality. So maybe this is going to help us sort of address some of them problems, which would be quite interesting. So I'd be looking forward to see what kind of things people do with that. Now, next up, we've got support for SDK types in a binding. The example Microsoft are given here is we've got a function in an isolated worker. They're passing in a blob client into the binding, so that's the trigger for your function. And they give the example here about streaming data when you're processing a larger blob. So what's quite interesting here is if you think about our function bindings in the past, usually if we take service bus, you would trigger your function. You might have a string input where the bindings kind of got the message, pulled the content out, deserialized it, so got it from the decoded it, giving you a string. Sometimes you might get the brokered message object, and then you can do some of that yourself. But it sounds like if they're going to support things like a blob client, I guess maybe a service bus client might be an option. something to play with in the future. But that's opening up new opportunities where with a blob client, you can sort of take control of reading the blob, I guess, and that's how you would page that larger blob. So that probably opens up some new opportunities on functions that would be cool to see what we can do with. Next up, we've got some enhancements for Service Bus here. So we've got completions, deferrals, dead lettering. So this will be one I'll definitely be playing around with to have a look a bit more about. And there's a link there, so I'll probably go and have a look at that later on. The hope here is, with that binding in Logic App Standard, we've leveraged the service bus trigger for a while, so hopefully some of these new enhancements will help Logic Apps, is what we would hope if we're integration developers on the Azure platform, so that would be quite cool. Some App Insight stuff, so here, again, this is another one I'll be digging deeper into a little bit, but we're going to be using App Insights a lot for both Logic Apps and functions. I know that there's some enhancements around version 2 support for a schema in App Insights for Logic Apps. I'm assuming maybe there's some relationship like that, so I'll probably have a look a bit more at that and look later at what we can do. So we've got enhancements for performance, which is a common, every time we get a new release, that's one of the big reasons. And again, some of the durable functions ones, that'll probably be something I'll dig a little bit more into later. It's a while since I've used durable functions. But I think those top few are some of the more interesting ones for the integration developers. Now, if we have a look a bit further down, so the other one that really stood out for me was this new flex consumption plan. So Tiago's wrote a really good article over here about with a bit more detail about this flex plan. So if anyone's from BizTalk days will remember Tiago, who now works on the function team, used to write loads of great content about BizTalk back in the day. Now, the flex consumption plan, so if we think about the functions that we build in our integration platform, the great thing about consumption was the pay per execute, low cost, available just when you need it model, and it was really good for those ad hoc functions and lightweight functions. And the problem we had with integrations, often we'd get these scenarios where we need some of the more enhanced features. So the really obvious one here is this networking. So what ended up happening is, even though our function would only run once a day or every hour or something like that, we'd need to host it on a premium plan to be able to get networking capability. So that meant the cost went up to pay for one of these pay per hour plans. So you'd end up with a monthly charge rather than just a per click. And it's if it's a function you don't use very often, it's quite a significant increase. So private networking is going to be really cool on a consumption plan. So the idea of the flex consumption is you still have the flexible billing model and you have that sort of serverless scale on demand, but you can use some of the more enhanced features. So private networking is going to be really quite cool for that one, I think, and I'm expecting that'll be quite popular in integration platforms. There's also a bunch of sort of performance and tuning options that are going to be available. So I think commonly with consumption functions, we'd always have things like cold starts and that kind of thing, where people would complain about just not getting that premium performance level, even though really it would scale, etc., really well. But you wanted a premium level of performance, but you wanted that pay per execute and serverless billing models. This gives you more of that, which is really good. So it looks like we're going to get more knobs to tune to get better performance, increased memory, better throughput. I assume it'll improve the experience on some of those challenges that we would have on consumption previously, which is really cool. Now, the interesting bit for me with this one, with this flex consumption plan, now I'm just spitballing ideas here. I've heard nothing from Microsoft about whether this is something even on their radar, but what would be really interesting is if we're running a logic app inside of Azure Functions in the runtime, and we now have the ability to have some of these tuning knobs here, some of this networking, could I run a logic app standard on a flex consumption plan, which would then let me have a consumption billing model for a logic app standard? That would be really interesting as a future thing. I've no idea whether that's on the radar, but if they haven't thought of that yet, Microsoft sounds like a really good idea. So maybe that's an integrate sort of thing they'll tell us about. I don't know, but that would be quite interesting. Also, there's some links to sign up, try out flex consumption. That's definitely one of the things I'll be looking to play around with functions. I think on that previous slide, the things I'll also be looking to try out are going to be, so we had some of these new bindings. I'll probably explore the, so I was a bit further, I'll probably explore that durable functions one a little bit. I think there was some stuff about Dapper as well, which I'd probably play around with over the coming months, I think. But really exciting times from Azure Functions for me. Lots of stuff that can help address some of the integration challenges we have today. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Just me spitballing ideas about what we heard at Ignite this week. What do other people think? I'd love to see blog posts about people talking about this stuff and hear what people have problems with and what opportunities they're seeing for some of these features. Hope everybody has a great week. Thank you.